everybody, and welcome back to my channel for yet another tutorial. This video is going to be on a casual unisex tank top. This is going to be perfect for summer, so let's go ahead and quickly gloss over the materials that we'll be needing. For our yarn, I will be using a number 2 sport weighted fiber. This is from Noro Yarns, and for all of those who are wondering, this is the Yukata line. It does have 50% silk, 25% wool, and 25% polyamide. For our hook, I will be using a 4.5mm crochet hook, and of course we'll need some scissors, a darning needle. Next up, I'll also be needing a measuring tape because we want to take our own body's measurements to get this to fit you perfectly. And last up, we'll also need some stitch markers to help mark our placement for the sleeves and the neckline. So let's go ahead and dive into the pattern. For this tank top, I'll be crocheting a front panel and a separate back panel. So what I need to do is start off by taking a few quick measurements across my model's body. What I want to do is stretch out my measuring tape to determine how wide I want my tank top to be. To create the base chain of this tank top, I need to crochet an even number of chains, so any multiple of 2 plus 1. And of course, you do want this starting chain to reach your initial measurement. I've just crocheted a base chain of 66, and for me this is going to reach a total of 18 inches. So at this point I can pick up my work again and chain 1 extra. To begin on row 1, I'll be working 1 whole row of double crochet. So what I'm going to do is yarn over, skip the first 3 loops from my hook, and insert my hook into the 4th chain. But I'm going to turn my work over and pick up the back bump so that it adds a little bit extra stretch to our project. So at this point I can yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, and pull through 2. Now I'm going to yarn over, look for the next stitch, and pick up the back bump and work another double crochet. And we'll just be repeating this for the entire row, so make sure that you pick up every single stitch. So here's what my row 1 is looking like. Again, we just have basic double crochet worked across the entire row. For row 2, I'm going to chain 1 and turn my work. And now for this row, we're going to be playing around with some single crochet and some chains. So what I'm going to do is go into the very first stitch and place a single crochet. And now here at this point, I'm going to chain 2, and I want to skip the next stitch. But what I'm going to do, instead of placing my single crochet into the 2 top loops, I'm going to be working this in between the 2 double crochet. So again, I'm not working through the 2 top loops. I'm going to pick up in between those 2 double crochet and work a single crochet. From here, I can chain 2. And from here, I'm going to skip the next 2 stitch places and insert my hook in between the 2nd and the 3rd double crochet. So again, I'm just going to go underneath and single crochet. And again, chain 2 and skip 2. So skip 1 and 2, insert my hook in between those stitches. And I'm just going to repeat this until the very end of my row. So again, chain 2, skip 1 and 2, insert in between the 2 double crochet. As I'm starting to come up here to the end of row 2, you'll notice that I have 1, 2, and 3 double crochet left in my row. So once more, I'm going to chain 2, and I'm going to work my single crochet into the chain 3 at the very end of the row. So I'm just going to make sure that I pick up those 2 top loops, and I can work my very last single crochet. So this is the end of row 2. For row 3, I'm going to chain 3 and turn my work. So what I want to do for row 3 is work 2 double crochet into each chain space that I created. So I'm going to find the very first chain of 2, and here I can work 2 double crochet. So there's 1, going right back in for my 2nd double crochet. Again, I'm going to look for my next chain 2 space available, and here I can work 2 double crochet. So there's 1, going right back in for 2, and I'm just going to repeat this for the entire row. So yarning over, look for the next available chain space, and work 2 double crochet. And I can go ahead and repeat this for the entire row. And now that I'm approaching my very last chain space available, what I'm going to do is work only one double crochet into that chain space. So there we have it, just one double crochet instead of two. And to finish out the row, I'm going to work my very last double crochet into that very last stitch. This is also the single crochet at the very end of the row. For row 4, what we're going to do is chain 1 and turn our work. And for row 4, we're just going to be repeating these same steps from row 2. So again, we're working with the single crochet and the chains. Into my very first stitch, I'm going to place a single crochet. And from here, I can chain 2. And for the very start of the row, I only want to skip one stitch and work a single crochet in between those two stitches. So go directly in between and place one single crochet. And now here I can go ahead and chain 2 and skip the next 2 stitches and insert my hook in between the second and the third stitch. So pick up directly underneath and work one single crochet, chain 2 and skip 2, insert in between and single crochet. And this row is a little bit easier because after we chain 2 and you take a look at your work, the 2 double crochet are kind of like linked together, and then we have this little gap in between all of them. I'm just going to be inserting my hook in between those little V's. So the work is a little bit easier to see here for the 4th row. Go ahead and repeat this for your entire row. Again, I'm coming up here to the end of row 4, so what I'm going to do is chain my last 2. I'm going to insert my hook into the chain 3 at the very end of the row and work my last single crochet. So that is how we finish off row 4. Now for rows 5 and 6 and for the rest of this top, we're just going to be alternating rows 2 and 3 over and over. And here for row 5, we're going to be repeating the same steps from row 3. So I can yarn over, look for the first little chain space right here and work 2 double crochet. So there's 1, going right back into that same chain 2 space and working 2, and again yarn over and look for the next little chain space. So again, this row 5 is a repeat of row 3, and for row 6 we're going to be repeating rows 2, and we're just going to continue to add on rows to this tank top until I start to approach my armpit section. Alright, so I've just taken some time and I've worked up a few more rows for the body section of the tank, and at this point this is what she's looking like. In total I've worked up 40 rows, so I'm going to give you guys some quick measurements. Again, this is sport weight fiber, and 40 rows gets me to exactly 11.5 inches tall. So at this point I'm going to go ahead and use some stitch markers because I want to mark off a few stitches at the beginning of the row and at the end of the row, and this is where we want to kind of create like a little bit of an curved armhole shape. So I'm going to go in right here and mark my stitches. So I've decided to place my stitch marker into the 4th chain space from the start of the row. So over here you can see I have 1, 2, 3, and into that 4th chain 2 space, that's where I'm placing my stitch marker. And of course on the other edge, same thing as well. I have 1, 2, 3, and into that 4th chain space from the edge of the panel, that's where I'm placing my stitch marker. So these are going to signify the end of the row and the start of the row, but in order to get started right here, we do need to kind of carry our work. So all I'm going to do is work some slip stitches across the first few stitches right here until I end up at my stitch marker. So again, I'm just going to place slip stitches through every single stitch that I have, and even here at my chain 2 spaces, I'll work 2 slip stitches just so that we have an equal amount and we're not like altering the fabric at all. And then now here at the stitch marker, I still need to work one more slip stitch so that I'm physically in there. And at this point, to start off row 1 of the sleeves, what I'm going to do is chain 3. So there's my chain 3, and next I'm going to go ahead and work my 2 double crochet into the next chain space available. And just like the standard pattern, find your first chain 2 space, and here is where I can work my 2 double crochet. And then again, yarn over, look for the next chain space, and work 2 double crochet, 2, And then from here I can just carry on with this pattern until I approach the end of my row. So I'm starting to come up here to the end of row 1 for like the little sleeve and chest section. And as you'll notice, I have 1 and 2 chain spaces left. So very similar to how we were working the end of our rows prior, I do want to end off with 2 separate double crochet. So here in the second to last chain space, I'm just going to work 1 double crochet. And then now here into my very last chain space where my stitch marker is, work 1 more double crochet, and that is simply the end of row 1. So let's go ahead and start working on row 2. I'm just going to chain 1 and turn my work. Now again, for the start of row 2, I do need to create a little bit of a decrease stitch so that we can get that slope going. So immediately after my chain 1, I'm going to skip the first 2 stitches in the row and then insert my hook in between those stitches and work my first single crochet. And now I can carry back with that pattern, so chain 2 and skip 2, work a single crochet, chain 2, skip 2, and I'm just going to repeat this until I approach the end of my row. So I'm starting to come up here to the end of row 2 and I still have a few more stitches to work. So I'm just carrying on with that chain 2, skip 2, single crochet. And now at this point I still have these 2 double crochet and my chain 3. So all I'm going to do here at the very end of the row is chain 1 instead of 2. And then directly underneath that chain 3 space, I'm going to pick that up and single crochet. So instead of ending with a chain 2 and then single crochet, I'm only chaining 1 and then single crochet into the starting chain. So now at this point I can go ahead and start row 3. Let's chain 3 and turn our work. And now at this point I can go ahead and work row 3 very similar to how I worked row 1 of the shoulder section. I'm going to yarn over and look for the first chain 2 space. So I will be skipping over this chain 1 section right here, leaving that off. I just want to find my first chain 2 and then work my 2 double crochet. So this is the start of row 3. Again, it's kind of like a replica of row 1. We're just kind of mimicking these skipped stitches at the start of a row. And now for the rest of the row, I can carry on with the 2 double crochet into each chain space until I approach the end of my row. So now I'm coming up here to the end of row 3, and as you can see, I still have 1 and 2 of those chain 2 spaces left. So what I'm going to do into those last 2 is only work 1 double crochet. So there's 1 double crochet, and then here into my very last chain 2 space, I'm going to work 1 last double crochet. So that is the end of row 3. So at this point I can go ahead, chain 1 and start working on row 4, but row 4 is going to be a repeat of row 2 and row 5 will be a repeat of row 3. And we're just going to repeat this over and over until you can get the inner edge of this panel right here to just barely cross over the edge of their armpit. Again, it's kind of up to you how you want your tank top to look, but for my tank top, I want this slope to rest underneath the armpit, and then by the time I'm done decreasing, I want the straight edge of the panel to kind of line up on the inner portion of their shoulder. So that's what I'm going to do right now. I'm just going to continue to work some decreases at the start and at the end of the row. Alright, so I've just finished working up my decrease rows for the armpit section, and this is what it looks like. For my body size, I've chosen to work up 6 total rows of decreases. So at this point, I can go ahead and continue working on the standard pattern. There's not going to be any more decreases along the outer edges of the panel. So what I'm going to do, picking up here with my 6th row, is just begin working that standard pattern, and I'm going to show you guys how to start it off. So after my chain 3, I'm going to yarn over, look for the first chain 2 space and work 2 double crochet. So there's 1 and 2, and again look for my next chain 2 space and place 2 double crochet. So now that I'm coming up to the end of my row 7, as you can see, I still have 1 more chain 2 space to work into. So I'm just going to work 1 double crochet directly into that space, and then I'm going to finish out the row with 1 last double crochet into the single crochet from the start of the row. So very similar to how we were working the very beginning of the pattern. Work a double crochet into your last chain 2 space, and then your very last double crochet goes into the single crochet from the row prior. So that is the next row with absolutely no decreases. And again, at this point, I'm just going to continue to add on basic rows without decreasing until I can get the top of this tank top to reach the height that I would like. So I'm going to choose somewhere around the center of my chest area and then stop there. And then I'll come back on camera to show you guys how I work some more decreases to shape the neckline. Now I've just taken up a little bit more time to add on some more basic rows following the repeat of rows 2 and 3 over and over. So after my decrease rows, I actually added on a total of 9 rows following that pattern. And at this point, I do want to leave off a few more stitches at the center so that we can kind of create a little bit of a scoop neck or boat neck. Of course, we are going to continue to work straight up along the edges, but now we're going to use those decreases along the center. So at this point, I've gone ahead and added some stitch markers towards the center of the neckline. What I've done is counted out 8 chain spaces away from the corner, and then I placed my stitch marker into that 8th chain space. And likewise, starting from over here, I counted out 8 and place my stitch marker into the 8th spot. So for my own body size, this is what I'm choosing. And for all those who are wondering, I'm leaving off about 4 inches along the center neckline. So again, right here, I'm no longer adding any more stitches, but what I am going to do is pick up here at the start of my row and work standard stitches across until I get to this stitch marker where I will work a decrease. And then once I turn my row, I will start with a decrease and then work regular stitches across. So picking up here after my single crochet and chain row, I do need to start back with the double crochets. So I'm going to chain 3 and turn my work. So I'm coming up here to the end of row 1 for the shoulders, and as you can see, I have 1 and 2 chain spaces left. So just like before when we were working the decreases, I'm going to work 1 double crochet into the last 2 chain spaces. So there's 1, and now I can go ahead and work 1 last double crochet into the chain space with my stitch marker. So that is going to be a little decrease here for row 1. Let's go ahead, chain 1 and turn our work. And now here for row 2, again, we're switching back to these single crochets. So I'm going to place 1 single crochet into that very first stitch, and I'm only going to chain 1. I'm going to skip the next stitch and insert between and work a single crochet. And now we can go back to chaining 2, skip 2, single crochet, chain 2, skip 2, single crochet until the end of your row. Let's go ahead and start working on row 3 of the shoulders. So again, I'm just going to be picking up every chain 2 space and working 2 double crochet. So we're pretty much following the same exact steps from row 1. I'm just going to work my way down the row. And now that I'm coming up to the end of row 3, again, I have 1 and 2 chain spaces left. So just like before, I'm going to be working 1 double crochet into each chain space. So there's my first, and into that very last chain in the row, work your last double crochet. So if I set this down, hopefully you can see that it's slowly starting to kind of taper out this direction. And I'm just going to continue to add on a few more rows of decreases, maybe just 1 or 2 more, and then I can carry on with the pattern working straight up the shoulder. All right, so at this point, I've just crocheted up to the very top of my shoulder section and I'm going to stop. A quick little recap, I worked up 6 rows of decreases along the neckline, and then I added an additional 3 rows without decreases so far. Now I'm going to go ahead and crochet another 5 standard rows for a total of 14 rows along the neck and shoulder section. So at this point, you can go ahead, cut your yarn, tie off a little knot right here. And now at this point, we're going to head over to the other corner, attach our yarn to this very corner, and then just repeat those same steps to match this shoulder section. At this point, my front panel is all completed. So as you can see, I have my body rows right here. I have some decrease rows for the armpit holes, and then I worked my way all the way up to the very top of my shoulders. So the total height of my top reaches exactly 19.5 inches. And as for the total width of my top, I have 18 inches right here. Now that we've finished making our front panel, it's time to go ahead and make a matching back panel. So what you're gonna wanna do is make the exact same amount of chains, follow the same exact pattern that you have. The only difference is that we will be leaving off this neck section. So just imagine this front panel completely worked through right here. So I've gone ahead and made my matching back panel, and of course it is matching in all aspects. And of course, as you can see, we just worked straight across the back panel without leaving off a neck section. So at this point, it's time to start seaming them together. All I'm going to be doing is laying them one on top of the other. So at this point, I have my front panel laying up against my back panel. And what I'm going to do next is use my spare yarn right here, just kind of pick up one of these tails. I'm going to use my darning needle and seam the shoulder pieces up against the back panel. And again, I'm just going to use my darning needle and whip stitch these two edges together. If you would prefer, you can also use your crochet hook to simply single crochet the two panels together. Now that my shoulders are connected at the top edges, I'm going to go ahead and repeat the same process along our body edges. So what I'm going to do is turn my work like so. I'm also going to attach a new yarn here at the absolute corner, the bottom corner of the tank. And then again, I'm just going to be picking up little bits of the fiber through both panels. And I'm just going to repeat this process all the way up until I reach the under armpit corner right here. At this point, this is what your tank should look like. We have both of the side seams all stitched together, as well as the upper shoulder section. So for some final finishing touches, what I'm going to do is attach my yarn to the very back of the collar and just begin working some single crochets in the round. I think I'm going to add on between 2 and 3 rows just to add a nice little clean border. And after I finish the neckline, I'm also going to repeat the process on the armholes. And what I would do is attach my yarn to the center seam right here, and then just begin placing single crochets in the round, making sure to turn my work at the end of every single row. So I've just attached a new yarn to the very center back panel, and at this point I'm just going to yarn over and pull up a loop and chain 1, and from this point I'm going to go right back into that same stitch and work 1 single crochet. From here into every chain 2 space I will single crochet 2 times. So here is 2 single crochet, and then moving into that single crochet next up, work 1 single crochet, approaching another chain 2 section. So now we just work 2 single crochets, and then at the next stitch right here, work 1 single crochet. And temporarily I will pull my hook out, set my work down, and kind of analyze and just make sure again that my work is not too bunched up and it's not too tight. And now that I've made it back to the start of my row, I'm going to make sure to pick up that chain 1 space and slip stitch directly into that. So that is the end of row 1 for the neckline. Now to continue adding on rows, all I'm going to do is chain 1 and turn my work around. And now at this point I can begin by placing 1 single crochet into every single stitch. So take your time, make sure that you're picking up both 2 top loops. And once you reach the very end of your row, make sure to slip stitch into that chain 1 space. I've just finished up the end of row 2 and I've slip stitched. I like the more simple, really basic border, so I'm just going to stick with my 2 rows. I've gone ahead already and cut off my yarn, and now I can tie a knot. So at the very end of this project, do make sure to go back and weave in this end. But at this point, now that my neckline is completed, I'm going to go ahead, attach my yarn to the bottom corner of the armhole, and just repeat the same process. So I'm just going to pick up whatever stitch I can find along this open edge and place single crochets in the round.